Every summer holiday, my family and I would get on a plane to Calcutta, India. When we got there, we'd get in a car and we'd drive for 8 hours away from the city. Occasionally, we'd stop for tea, until 8 hours later, we got here. The village where my father grew up, in the district where he met my mother, where they got married, moved to Indonesia, then the UK, and lived happily ever after in London. To put into perspective where my parents came from, eating eggs for breakfast was a luxury. I'd been to this India over 15 times, and I thought I knew India pretty well. This is the India that I knew. Here's a school down the road from where my mother grew up, and on the day that we visited, there is one teacher among 4 classes. It's an India where only 50% of the young people you just saw will go on into high school. It's an India where many young girls don't have the opportunity to go to school because they need to contribute to the household income, in this case, through onion farming. And the same goes for many young boys too. But there's more to India than this. India is a nation that defines the idea of doing more with less, and that's the journey that I want to take you on today. So let's drive back for 8 hours, get on a plane for 2.5 hours, and this time fly to the other side of India. Welcome to Mumbai, home to one of the most expensive residential properties in the world, at 27 stories high and worth over $1 billion. Back on the ground, 7% of Mumbai city is covered in slums, but 55% of Mumbai's population lives in this 7%. As well as being home to one of the most expensive residential properties, Mumbai is also home to one of the largest slums in the world, Dharavi. Home to 1 million people, it's been labeled a city within a city and is also the very same slum that was featured in Slumdog Millionaire. So let's go into the slums because there's more to them than you think. So when I was first proposed with the idea of visiting the slums, my first reaction was, what are we going to go and do there? Feel sorry for them. And one of my friends who'd never been to the slums even said, keep your bag close. Sometimes they cut it and they run. But little did she or I know, it was quite the opposite. This is not a land for destitute people. What Dharavi is a hub of innovation and inspiration. What you see in Dharavi is the idea that runs throughout the whole of India of doing more with less. What you see is people creating value out of things that to us appear worthless. The annual exports to come out of Dharavi are $600 million a year. So, back in the UK, you order a washing machine. It comes in a box, you break down the box, and off it goes to the dustbin men to sort. In India, you collect your scraps, and you resell them for them to end up here to be recycled on mass scale in Dharavi. And it doesn't stop there. What you see here are masses of plastic ready to be broken down into plastic pellets to be put back into the supply chain. What they're even now doing is creating filaments for 3D printers from this recycled plastic. The thing is, to recycle in India is not out of fear of being fined or even seen as just a good thing to do. It's a necessity born out of the constraints that Indians face. What you see here are paint tin cans being stripped down to be remolded and sent back to companies, good as new. And what you see here are aluminium bars that have been created from scraps of aluminium. What I'm showing you here today is just a very small insight into what goes on in the slums. And no one took my bag because they were too busy working hard to even notice that I was there. But that's not where the misconceptions of India end. There's more to India than villages and slums. So let's get out of Mumbai and let's fly down to the south. Welcome to Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India. So when we think about technology in relation to India, the easy associations to make are call centers and cheap outsourcing. Or you assume that Indian engineers are vying to leave India, just like my dad once did. But there's more to India than this. India's startup ecosystem is rapidly growing. Indian engineers are shifting the balance to India to solve India's problems. Every single day, 3 to 4 startups are born out of India, giving it the 3rd highest number of tech startups in the world. In a country that faces electricity power cuts, lack of internet, and poverty. To put their startup ecosystem into context, in the USA, the average valuation of a startup is $4.4 million. In the UK, it's $2.9 million. In India, it's $2.7 million. So India, as a developing country, is only 5% of the valuation of a UK startup. And with an average population of 29 compared to 40 here in the UK, they have the highest number of young founders in the world. 72% of founders are less than 35 years of age. And in Bangalore in particular, it's 28.5 compared to 36 in Silicon Valley. And it's this young ecosystem that's not only accelerating India's growth, but they're also the same ones that are going to be sustaining it. What's even more interesting is that non-Indians are immigrating into India, into Bangalore, to start up companies. What they're being attracted by is a maturing startup ecosystem, a massive growing middle-class market to serve, and low costs. Even if we go up a level, let's look at the big companies. There are huge companies that dominate huge markets in the UK and the US, but go to India and you find themselves struggling. Why? Because there's already Indians solving India's problems who understand India's context. It's understanding how to innovate within constraints. It's understanding things like only 1/3 of Indians have a bank account. What that means is only 5% of transactions in the whole of India go through bank accounts. 95% of transactions go through cash and postal orders. So many companies are dominating through the cash on delivery model. You order your items online, they turn up at your door, and you pay them in cash. Secondly, India is a mobile-first nation. The USA built its economy around the car, and India is building theirs around the mobile phone. This has even motivated massive companies to come off web apps and move solely onto mobile apps. But they still have a long way to go. A lot of these phones are low-powered, and data is still slow and expensive. Just because of this very reason, just last week, a massive online company in India, valued at $15 billion, stopped selling ebooks and moved on to physical books. Why? Because for Indians living in India, physical books are still more accessible and cheaper to buy. But there's more to these companies. They're not just the next big social network or dating app or helping you find a restaurant easier. There's more to these companies than you think. What you see here is India tackling food poverty. India is leveraging technology to solve problems that everyday citizens face, from connecting rural households with bank accounts, to creating affordable education, to even creating apps for the local fishermen to increase their yield. What you see here is a factory in Bangalore that's part of a network that helps to deliver 1.4 million midday meals a day to young people across schools. To put that into context, in the UK in 2015, across nursery, primary, and secondary schools, just under 1 million young people were given access to free school meals. The aim here is simple. No child should be deprived of an education due to hunger. A similar statement that was shared by our very own Department for Education not too long ago. What they do here is they create meals for less than 10p a meal. They're highly nutritious, they're vegetarian, and they're still high in protein. What these meals mean is that parents have a greater incentive to send their kids to school, young people are nourished better, and ultimately they learn more. They even send extra meals for siblings and parents who are also faced by food poverty. What's even more interesting is that everything is publicly available, even their intellectual property. Why? Because they believe to fulfill that vision that no child is deprived of education due to hunger, this model needs to be replicated. So, if we look over to India, what do we see? A developing country with a population of 1.2 billion, facing a number of constraints from water, sanitation, healthcare, and education. But look past the semantics of developed and developing, and you'll realize we have more in common with India than we think. We are moving towards a resource-strapped society. We too need to learn to do more with less. There are many generalizations you can make about India and Indians, and most of them are just that, generalizations. But what you see at the core of every pocket in India is entrepreneurial spirit. No matter their situation, no matter what they do or do not have, they are determined to move forward. They are determined to do more with less. From the little boy who makes a toy car out of a plastic bottle, to the workers in the slums, to my very own mother, who uses one too many margarine containers to store last night's leftovers. Let's learn to do more with less. Thank you.